friends, my name is Joey Balistreri. Welcome to my work table. Today I am making earrings. I have been in my own stash and done shopping in my own supplies. I love to do that. I love to use what I've purchased, and I am making a bunch of earrings, all different designs from, I've laid them out here from like an intermediate level of difficulty, and I put them in order of difficulty to the very easiest. So we're going to start with the most difficult one. I will put links in the description box of everything that I'm using that I know where I got it. I have been making jewelry for so many years, and when I go shopping in my own supplies, sometimes I don't know where things came from, but if I know, I will put links in the description box, so don't forget to tap more under the video. And mine are usually quite large because I always list all my favorite tools as well. And so tap more again depending on your device, and you'll see everything, all the links. So it may save you some time if there's a project here that you really like. So the first one is the only one that I have put an ear wire on, because I really, when I make earrings like this, I really love to do interchangeable. So I have an interchangeable pair of ear wires here that I made, and I have a gold-filled interchangeable pair of ear wires. So I'll link the video for the ones that I made underneath, and I'll also link couple of sources for getting the gold-filled interchangeable ones. You could also do sterling silver if you love sterling, if you're a silver lover. I'm a gold and copper girl. I think it goes better with my coloring, and so that's what I usually work with if I'm going to make things for myself. But this first pair is basic stringing with a needle and thread, and it is I would say intermediate, just because of the knots and the gluing, and if you're not a seed beater, maybe you find this a little bit tedious, but it's not labor intensive at all. It's the most labor intensive, and that's saying something because there's not a lot of work to any of these. They're pretty fast projects, but I just wanted to do like a fringe style with a lot of dangle, kind of a mini chandelier, and give it a little fall vibe. So these are, let me see, they're right here. These are hessonite garnets that came from the Beadbox Bargains website, and I just love the facets on them, and also these little leaves, these little check glass leaves, they also came from the Beadbox Bargains website. So if you're not familiar with that, it is a fabulous resource. If you get the Bargain Bead Box every month, if you are a subscriber to that, you can shop the sister website Beadbox Bargains with a 30% off coupon over and over again as many times during the month as you want to shop. And there you will find all kinds of ear wires and all kinds of gemstones, and they have a little bit of everything. It's a wonderful website for jewelry makers. So you'll see as I go through, I'll point out, but a lot of my supplies did come from there. Another website that I love is Potomac Beads. It is a great resource for seed beads, and I like their dragon thread for certain projects. So I had a little tiny spool of dragon thread from one of the bead boxes from the treasure box from Potomac Beads, and this is that little strand of hessonite garnets. And I have 3 more little leaves for the second earring, and what I'm using here is basically a multi-strand connector, like a bracelet bar. They can be used for necklaces too, but I decided to turn this into a chandelier earring, so I just took 2 of them. The first one is done, and I'm going to string on to this one. So we're going to get this first one going. I am using a big eye needle. If you're not familiar with that, it's a really tiny little needle that's split down the middle, and you just put your thread in there. It's really easy to thread. And what I'm going to do is start off on the end here and just tie an overhand knot a couple of times and leave a little bit of a tail. And I'll show you why we're going to be using that tail as we create our fringe. So I'm just going to do a couple of overhand knots. I am a gluer. I like to use a little GS Hypo Cement or Beadalon Beater's glue when I am bead weaving. I have a friend who specializes in bead weaving, and she does not glue. So, there's a lot of ways to do things, and I'm not an expert at bead weaving. I do a little bit here and there. I like to add my own weaving into my projects. So I do it my way, but I'm just going to do a couple of little knots. I don't want to make this, you know, if you can see, I don't want to make this too noticeable where I'm tying on to the connector bar. So I'm just going to leave that little tail because we're going to need that. And then what I did is created a pattern of 2 hessonites, a seed bead, a gold seed bead, 1 hessonite for a focal, and then 2 more hessonites. And the seed beads that I'm using in this are also from Potomac Beads, and these are Toho seed beads, and this is called Old Gold. I really loved the color of this gold with these hessonite garnets. I guess it's a little bit orangey and it's a little bit autumnal to me. So I'm going to put some of those out here, and I'm going to start off. In fact, let me just take some of these off. It's a little bit easier to string these small beads from your mat, I find, rather than picking them up. So what I did for my pattern is 2 hessonites, a seed bead, 1 hessonite, and then another seed bead. So that's like the center of this pattern. So you could do any pattern you want. This is really fun. Really, really fun. And then let's see, 2 more. So there's a total of 5, and these are finely faceted, and they really are. When you look up close at them, for being a little 3mm bead, they have the most intricate little facets. I just love them. So I just thread that down to my bar, and then I'm going to take 3 seed beads and string those on. And then one of my leaves, there is a front and a back to this little check glass leaf, but they have detail on both sides. But I'm going to take my needle from the back and go through to the front, and then string on another 3 seed beads. And just bring that down. And now what I'm going to do is skip over all the seed beads and run my needle from the first, or I guess the last, hessonite garnet on that strand, and now run my needle back up to the top through everything, and just be careful that you don't skip a bead, because if you do, then your thread will be on the outside of that bead. So, and I do, you know, you can see that I'm leaving it lay on my mat. So I've just run my needle back through, and when I pull tight, I'm just going to hold on to my little leaf and just pull all my beads up to the little connector bar. And here's where we're going to use that little tail and do another couple of overhand knots. And I'll show you just a little trick for making your fringiness. When you do pull your knot, see how tight it gets. So I'm just going to just back it down and make sure that my little strand is hanging. And I'm going to let this hang out, and after I've done all 3, I'm going to open my GS Hypo Cement, because this glue starts flowing the minute you take the pin out, and I'm just going to dot the glue and then cut all my little tails at the same time. So for right now, I'm just going to let that hang out there. Go ahead and trim it a little bit shorter. And I'm going to do the same thing on the last 2 strands. Same exact thing, just tie on. And then the only thing that's different is my pattern for the middle strand was a little bit longer, and I just alternated where my gold seed beads were going to go. Okay, I'm just going to open this glue. If you're not familiar with GS Hypo Cement, it starts to flow when you remove the pin. It's got a really nice precision tip, but it's a little bit of a pain because it comes out really fast and it keeps coming out until you get that pin back in. So that's why I opted to get the glue on all 3 of my knots at once. And then I'll put the lid back on this and then let this set up a little bit to dry. Okay. See, it's just flowing. Okay. So I'm going to just let this little guy hang out for a second, and I can go ahead and open this ear wire. It's a lever back, but not an interchangeable one. And this is the only earring that I opted to put an ear wire on. It's just a little bit involved of an earring. I try to be really careful with these types of ear wires, because if you break that off, the earring is gone, but the ear wire is useless then, but it does need to be opened a little bit more. There we go. Okay, it looks pretty terrible with all the threads hanging, but I'm gonna let my GS Hypo Cement set up. It's always a good idea to let it dry before you snip away your tail threads. I'm just gonna set this one aside, and after that sets up, I will trim away those tails, but we'll have our second little autumn earring ready. So the next one to me is the next level of difficulty. Actually, this one and this one, not really difficult. I'm having a hard time saying that it's difficult because it's really not, just maybe a little bit different. So let me get to the actual earring in my little dish here. So this is what the final earring looks like. It's a little teardrop with a finding on the end. It's really a cord end finding, but it's one that you can smash the center section here, and that's what holds everything in shape. And then I did 3 little copper bead rings hanging from it, and this can go on my interchangeable ear wires or my earrings that I made. It can do either. So it's a really sweet, really fun design. Let's look at it on this one. I just love it. So I did a little bit of gold dots in with the copper because both of my interchangeable pairs of ear wires are gold, and I love mixing gold and copper. So that's what we're going to go for on this one, and I am going to just pull this apart and show you exactly what I did. In fact, let me take everything out of the little dish and get that out of the way so you can see. So the first part is a little, let me show you what I used, and I'm being brave here. I don't have a bead stopper on anything. I used my Antique Brass Color Metallic Soft Flex 49 strand bead stringing wire. It's absolutely my favorite bead stringing wire. I pretty much use it for everything. And what I did is, and you don't need very much, I cut a bracelet length because that is also what these little rings are made out of. So I just cut a bracelet length and made all my little rings. But I just strung on a pattern, and let me tell you what these beads are. These are also from Bead Box Bargains, and these are faceted rainbow tourmaline. So they're really one of my favorite gemstones, and I just love the berry tones in this, and the little facets give the earrings a little sparkle. So I just created another pattern where I did, you know, I like odd numbers, so I did 3 of the tourmaline and then a little 15-0 gold seed bead. These are the ones that I love to use. I love the Potomac beads ones. These are 15-0, and these are Duracoat galvanized, so they're a little bit more expensive, but that means wherever I've put a little dot of gold, it will maintain its color. Okay, and now, before I close up my little top part, I want to string on these rings that I've made. I'm going to lay this down. As I said, I'm being brave because I don't have a clamp. And what I've done here is gone ahead and strung the same pattern on that same bead stringing wire. I did 5 little copper seed beads separated by one of those little gold seed beads, and then I'm using a number 2 copper crimp tube, and I put that on, and then I'm going to put this wire going through the tube in the opposite direction. So it's just making a circle. So can you see the 2 little ends there? And then I'm just going to grab a hold of those and pull and just make that little circle. And so on this pattern, I only have 3 of the metallic gold seed beads because my little copper one made that next that next, space, I guess. And so these are the seed beads that I'm using for those loops. I just had these Czech beads, 11-0 seed beads. They're called bronze, but I see copper. And then here's the gold ones that I showed you. And so from here, I'm going to use my magical crimping plier to turn that little crimp tube into a bead. So I'm just going to make sure that this is pulled tight, and then put my magical crimp in there just so that my tube is right in the center of the divot inside the tool, and close it. And I've pinched all 4 corners, and then I'm going to place it in the opposite direction, making sure it's in the middle of the divot. Close it again, and then just go around a few times, opening and closing. So I'm turning that tube into a little tiny bead, and it looks like that. And now I can come in and trim. And so here again, there's a lot of adjustability in this design, because you could do only 1 ring hanging. You could, like I like the look of the 3, but you could do only 1. And then you could do, more circles. I have a special video coming up with some other ideas with variations on this design, I guess I meant to say. So I'm just going to thread that on to my larger loop and bring these together. And then I'm going to take my cord end. It's a crimpable cord end. And I'm going to feed these 2 wires through it and pull it down, and just make sure that it's down there really tight. I'm going to place my pliers there, and I'm pulling with my left hand so that this stays nice and tight. And while I'm pulling, I'm going to close gently. You can break these. I have broken them before being too aggressive, but just need to make sure that I've pinched. Turn it around and do it from the other side as well. Just make sure that I've pinched that middle section and give it a little tug. These won't get a lot of, pulling, because it's not a bracelet closure. So just give it the tug test. And the main thing, if you're using these crimpable cord ends, is to make sure before you crimp down that this loop is facing forward and it didn't like shift off to the side, because your earring won't hang right if not. And I just want to get in here and snip those tails, and that little pair of earrings is done. It's basically simple stringing. And then I love these because they go nicely on either one of my ear wires, either the ones that I made. I love them. Oh, I love them. They're a little bit of geometry with the teardrop and the rings, and just like really fun connecting. And what I love about these also is that a non-jewelry maker will look at these earrings and really have no idea where this starts or stops, because the magical crimps look like little tiny beads. It looks like literally nothing is holding this earring together. It is so beautiful. I just love it. That is such a fun pair. So we can set those aside and go to the next level of difficulty. So this is a little earring frame. I just picked these up at the craft store. Whoops. So that's how it came. There was a really long one as well. And I am just simply embellishing the center of this frame with some 24 gauge wire, just a small piece of 24 gauge wire. I have some lapis lazuli here. They are also faceted, little micro faceted gemstones. And I have one little hex bead. This is a 8.0 galvanized starlight hex bead. It's from a bead shop, but I'm pretty sure you can find these on Potomac Beads in their seed bead section of the website. I always put links to Potomac Beads when I'm using seed beads, because it's such a great source for that. But I'm literally only using one in the design, and I like odd numbers, so I strung 3 of my lapis lazuli and then one of those little hex beads, and then 5. And I like the way it's separated in like 1/3 and 2/3, and I got my odd numbers, and I got the perfect little drop. So that's what that looks like. I'm going to dump these out on the mat. They're a little bit easier to string from the mat. And the way that I started this is by doing a really tiny, simple loop at the top. So I'm just putting a bend in that little, this is, if I didn't say, 24 gauge wire. And I'm going to come with my round nose pliers. It almost is going to look as if I'm making a simple loop. But I'm just going to go down really close to the tip of my round nose pliers because I need a tiny loop. If you can see, that is the loop at the top of that earring. So just going to, got to hold it really tight with this fine wire. Just going to wrap it around, rotate my pliers, and just bring that around. So I'm just making a really tiny little loop. I'm just going to warm and straighten. I want this part of the wire to be nice and straight. And then I'm going to come with the flat side of my flush cutters and trim that little tail right where that wire meets. So let me get my fingers out of the way. Can you see? Just a tiny little simple loop. Put these back. We don't need those. And I'm going to open this loop, and there is a front and a back to this little frame. That's what the back looks like. And I'm just going to open it a little bit wider. I'm just going to get my simple loop into this frame with the wire. Whoops, go again, dropped it. It's very small. And just get it in there so that I can close it up, and so that the wire is hanging down the front of this frame. So let me close it and then I'll show you. Okay, so my wire is now dangling on the front of the frame. Let me give it a little bit of TLC here. Make sure it's closed really well. Little tiny bit of work hardening. Once I have this in here, it's, you know, it's not going to get much stress. So then I want this wire to be nice and straight. And then I'm going to thread on this exact bead pattern that I did for the first earring. Okay, it's going to let those fall down in line. And now I'm just going to secure this to the bottom of this frame as neatly as I can. So what I did on this one is I did a couple of wraps on one side of my downward line, and then I had to just swing over to even it out to have wraps on this side too. And you know, they're just I want it to be decorative on the front of the earring, but I want it to secure this as well. So I'm just going to fold this wire right up toward the back and just bend it. Try not to kink your wire when you're doing this. Just bend it around that frame and just get a couple of wraps on one side, 2 or 3, whatever you like the looks of. And the way I do this is I kind of like curve the wire around before I give it a pull. And give it a nice tight pull. And you can always like zhuzh this over and pull those little wraps together. And then I'm going to come to the back and just kind of cross over and do the same number of wraps on the other side of my downward bar, just to secure it. Okay, and just make sure your little beads are straight. Once you have your wraps done, just straighten everything. And I like to kind of pinch the wraps around. I think I need one more to make it look even. One more, and then trim it off in the back. Okay, I'm going to trim it really close. And then just kind of with my pliers, just chase it around and tighten those wraps up. Just make it really neat. And pull it to the center of the frame. Whoops, can't hold on to it. That is so cool. So not too difficult and just really beautiful. And you have a gemstone necklace. I can't talk. And then these can also like feed right on to, whoops, these do have a front and a back, so they can feed right on to my ear wires. Aren't they lovely? Oh, I just think those are so pretty. So that third pair is done. And now for the last two pairs, which were super, super easy, basically creating a bead pattern. So I have these little Czech glass, they're like a matte glass, little leaves, and they already had the glass was like molded around a little wire, and I just created a little pattern of these gemstones. These are what are these? These are the faceted rainbow tourmaline again. Oh no, these are fire agate, faceted fire agate beads that I had in my stash, and I used some Czech glass, gold, an elongated bicone, and some little small drucks just to create that little pattern. And it's just like a downward rod with a dangling leaf at the bottom, and this can go on either one of my ear wires. These leaves also have a front and a back, so let me see if I can string it on right. No, I did it backwards. I do it backwards every time. I am so dyslexic, and these type of things take me a couple of tries to see it. But that is just a fun little autumn berries, you know, like the pinks of autumn, the darker burgundy pinks. And I just love the movement, and I love a downward. I don't so much wear big earrings, but I do love like longer dangling earrings. I think they're so fun and flirty. So this one is super easy. I did have to use a 22 gauge wire in order to fit through my little gemstones here. So let me dump everything out. I put a few extra gemstones for completing that pattern. And on this one, I used my 1.5 millimeter one-step looper. So I'm just going to put the wire in just past the back jaw of the plier, and I'm gently closing it so that I have control. And this tool makes a blunt cut, so I can skip that step with my cutters, giving myself a fresh cut. And then I'm just pulling this wire down, and I'm going to warm and straighten because I want to start with a nice straight rod. And you know what that did? I have a chance to see that loop and see that I've centered the wire on the loop. And when I take it away, I have a really pretty little loop, and my fresh cut is done. And I'm going to go ahead and open this loop and go ahead and feed on my little Czech glass leaf and close the loop. And as always, work hard in a little bit. And so now I'm just going to repeat that bead pattern. I put one of these Czech glass elongated bicone beads, and then my pattern on this one was 3 of the fire agate, and then I did a gold spacer bead, and then 2 fire agates, a gold spacer bead, and finished off with 2 fire agates. So that's just the little pattern that I came up with. But if you like the idea of this design, you know, you can do whatever pattern you like the look of, and also depending on what beads you're working with. Okay, my stringing is done, and I'm going to get my one-step looper again and put the loop on this end. This time I will use the guide hole, put the wire all the way through the back of the tool. I just gently close just so I can see what I'm doing. I can see if I need to turn this loop, make sure that everything's in place, and then I'm going to let it make that cut, make the loop, and then I'm going to pull my wire down, finish closing, finish making the loop, and then from here I can see if I need to straighten anything or if my loops are aligned, and they look great. this 22 gauge wire is fine for that tool. So I'm just going to make sure it's closed and work hard in that loop a little bit. And that pair of earrings is done. And these can also go on either my lever back or the ones that I made. So, you know, I have a couple of options as far as the ear wires go. Let's see if I can get these on right. Nope, I always do backwards the first time. So they can go on my interchangeable lever back ear wires, or they can go on the hoops that I made that are interchangeable. I just love those. That is the kind of earring that you can just throw on. You can actually dress it up with a silk blouse, but if you're just wearing jeans and a t-shirt, it looks great with that too. So there is my 4th pair of earrings, and the 5th pair is equally as easy. I created just a little pendulum with a beaded bead that I got from CZECH Beads from the website, and I used some of my solid brass findings from Purity Beads and literally a single 6/0 seed bead just for a little, I was making this kind of look like a lantern or like a little pendulum. And I just love this. Even the ball head pin that I'm using is solid brass. So again, this little pendulum earring can feed on my ear wires that I made or my interchangeable ones. It's so fun. And literally there's a beaded bead, a little disc spacer, really it's like a rondelle spacer, and a bead cap and 1 seed bead. And I'm using a 2-inch ball head pin. Let me put these little fire agates away. So I'm just going to take a 2-inch ball head pin. And what is so nice about doing an earring with a 2-inch ball head pin and your 1-step looper is you don't need to measure in order to get both earrings exactly alike. And so the pattern I came up with for this one is just 1 seed bead, this rondelle disc spacer. These are so pretty. The brass has like a brushed finish on it, and it's really pretty. And then these beautiful little beaded beads from CZECH Beads, and a little topper, little bead cap topper. And then I don't need to measure anything because I'm going to hold on to this and come to my 1-step looper. And what I did on the first earring is what I always do when I don't have beads on the wire, is just put the end of the wire just a little bit past the back jaw. I know the tool is going to give me a fresh cut. They're solid brass, so the tool hesitates a little bit because it's a little bit tougher than craft wire. And I don't have to do anything with my beads. I'm letting them float. And that same thing, just pull that wire down so that this loop is centered on everything. And when I take it away, I have a perfect loop. It's consistent with my other one, and my drops, my pendulums match perfectly, and I didn't have to measure anything or make any kind of a mark. I always like to work hard in my loops a little bit, although these are solid brass, so these are going to be nice and sturdy. And again, these go on either one of my ear wires. They're so cute on either one. I just love this style of earring. If you've been around my channel, you might have seen that I've done those before. So again, don't forget to check the description box. I do have one more thing left to do. I am going to come to my earring that was drying and take my little thread scissors and clean this all up. And then any of my findings here that are just fashion jewelry, like these little 3-hole connector bars that I used for these earrings, these little bead frames here, that might be all that needs it, but I'm going to put an anti-tarnish coating on them. And again, if you have been on my channel at all, I don't always show it in every video, but when I'm finished making a piece, whether I do it on camera or after I'm done filming, I always brush my anti-tarnish coating on anything that's fashion jewelry. I just really love adding that little step of quality. It's super easy to do. It's easier than polishing your nails. So I'm going to just lay these in you can use a plastic bag or anything you want. And I'm just going to take my Permalac coating. I use the semi-gloss because with that, if I accidentally brush it over a bead or a crystal, it doesn't cloud it. And I'm just going to even get the brush like inside these little holes and make sure that I go across the top. And you can even, if you are using, like in this case, I just put some fashion jewelry lever back ear wires, I will even brush this over the ear wires. It dries really quickly. And if you sell your jewelry, whether you're at a fair or whether you're typing a listing for a website, to add to the description that everything, all of your metal findings have an anti-tarnish coating is really a great selling feature. So as I said, I will do that to the frames on these little guys. And pretty much these don't need it. They're copper and they won't go anywhere. So really in this 5 pairs of earrings, the only fashion jewelry metals that need that are these little bead frames and these little connector bars. But you can brush it over any of your spacer beads that are just metal findings. You know, stylists will tell you that fashion jewelry is only supposed to last a season. You wear it a couple of times and then it's out. But when I hand make something and when I work on a design like this, you know, I want it to last a little bit longer. So this is still a tiny bit wet on the back, and sometimes you have to take a piece of wire and like just kind of make sure you don't have a bubble in these little kinds of spaces. But this is such a wonderful product, and it does dry really fast. It's dry to the touch. It's still kind of cool, so I know it needs a little bit of time to dry, but I'm going to finish brushing that on all of my other little pieces that need to be done, and I'll put some pictures up at the end of the video. Again, don't forget to check the description box. I'll put links there. So if you were interested in anything that I did today, or you have an idea based on this or that was triggered by this, I'm so happy. And if you need supplies, I try to, you know, spend a little time making those description boxes. So I thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little video and this like creative time, and I will see you in the next video. Ciao, creative friends.